This podcast episode is sponsored by Geekdom, San Antonio's entrepreneurship hotspot and co-working space. Whether you need one-time recurring office space or event space, Geekdom has it all. Use code SOCIALBUTTERFLY when signing up for a membership to receive $25 off of monthly memberships. Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high-achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. There's a very specific kind of exhaustion that I keep noticing lately with many of you. You have a very well-established business and you've invested in yourself and have done the work. And yet, privately, there is this constant undercurrent of second guessing. I know. I believe a lot of you, those who identify as high achieving women, are quietly carrying this right now without even realizing just how much it's impacting the way you lead, the way you show up, the way you make decisions, the way you build your visibility, and the way that you run your business. And honestly, it's also in the way that you experience yourself. The second guessing of yourself shows up in how you overthink your decisions. You keep looking externally for reassurance before trusting what you already feel internally. And after a while, because we live in a culture that's super obsessed with optimization, you start assuming, well, maybe I just need a better marketing strategy. But honestly, I do not believe visibility or marketing or social media marketing for that matter is the real issue for a lot of you anymore. The real issue is that somewhere along the way, somewhere in your business journey, you stopped trusting yourself. And that's what we are going to talk about today. In this episode, we are going to dive into the psychological cost that is constantly overriding many of us, the emotional exhaustion of building a business from proving energy, the fear of being seen fully, the nervous system inconsistency that I see in so many of the brilliant women that I coach, and the way self-trust erosion quietly starts impacting our leadership. I also want to talk about my own relationship with this because over the last year in particular, I have been evolving my business model at a very fast paced rate. I have been elevating my pricing structure, really redefining my ideal client, and stepping into deeper levels of strategic coaching and leadership. And I've had to confront some of these uncomfortable truths about myself too. Truths I honestly didn't realize were there until I started really expanding. One of the things that nobody really prepares you for as a leader is that expansion has a way of exposing the places where your self-trust is conditional. I have felt this heavily as I started positioning myself at a more premium level. My work started to evolve and I could feel that very quickly. I was also recognizing that my clientele and the clientele that I was starting to attract had evolved as well. And that also meant that the depth of my coaching needed to evolve with it. There was a part of me that became deeply aware of the gap between who I knew I was becoming and the parts of me that still felt very uncertain. I remember having moments last year as I was picking apart my business and rebuilding it, reimagining it, where I thought, can I really coach women that are operating at this very premium level? Can I still hold space for women that are making very different kinds of decisions that are deeply felt and deeply seen and are more internal than they are external? Can my expertise genuinely create transformation at this level? And I think the most confronting one that we always talk about is around pricing. I was starting to feel really uncomfortable and questioning myself if I could really charge at the level that I'm charging now. I believe many women understate the true scale of their work. because they're afraid of how it will be perceived, especially when our work is really changing how people are thinking and leading and positioning themselves and how they operate, not just in their business, but how they operate on a day-to-day life scale. I realized that I'm no longer interested in shrinking the depth of my work just to make other people feel more comfortable. My private coaching starts at $24,000 a year. And for a long time, I was scared to say that out loud. But after investing deeply into my own growth over the last 5 years, I fully understand that the long term ROI of being sharpened and challenged, recalibrated, and expanded at a premium level can radically change the trajectory of your leadership, your visibility, your business, your wealth, and most importantly, your life. And it doesn't happen in just months. It really spans for years. And that's the work that I do with my clients. When I was realizing how much of my trust in myself had quietly become attached to external proof, that is when I started to see things kind of fluctuating. Especially my internal trust became fluctuating as well. That realization shook me more than I could ever expect because I was starting to realize that not just me, but many of you, those who identify as really high achieving women who've built businesses, are actually operating with conditional self trust. Meaning, I trust myself only when things are going well. Or I trust myself when people validate me and my decisions. Or maybe I trust myself when clients are signing at a consistent rate, my content is performing, I'm going viral, when the money is consistent, or when I feel emotionally certain. But the second that uncertainty enters the room, the second that visibility doesn't immediately create that validation, that's when everything internally starts wobbling. And this is the part that I believe many sophisticated founders are silently exhausted by. It's not the work itself, but it's that constant internal negotiation that is happening underneath the work. Most of the women that I coach are deeply intelligent and strategic. Yet they are tired from constantly overriding themselves. And honestly, I feel that years of overfunctioning creates a very specific kind of disconnection from the self, especially if you've learned early in your life that being competent was how you survived. I feel a lot of women build their successful businesses from that energy. And in the beginning, it does work, but eventually the business becomes heavier because the identity underneath it is very exhausted. Proving is definitely not sustainable fuel for leadership at a very premium level. It's not. And I feel many of you are waking up to that realization right now. The realization of I built a business around performance and not trust. That is a huge, hard realization, especially when your business looks successful from the outside. There's this kind of guilt that is attached to the exhaustion where you start thinking, well, of course I should be grateful. I should feel more fulfilled. I should feel more confident by now. Meanwhile, privately, your nervous system is constantly scanning for the certainty. That's where visibility starts becoming very emotionally complicated. Visibility is going to amplify whatever is unresolved internally. That's what nobody talks about. We just think that visibility is all about putting yourself out there, when in reality, if you already trust yourself deeply, visibility is going to become an expression from it. But if you are fragmented internally, that visibility is going to become exposure. Every post is going to start feeling very emotionally loaded. And maybe the opinions that you have, your perspective is going to start feeling very risky for yourself. And then when you start thinking about pivoting in your business, it's going to feel terrifying. Every moment of being misunderstood feels deeply personal, and it starts becoming very emotionally attached to your worth. And suddenly, that's when I hear women saying, I hate social media. I hate visibility. I don't want to be visible. I want to be behind the scenes. I'm just super burned out with content and having to perform to the algorithm. When I sit with clients privately, I really uncover the deeper truth. And that's usually that they don't necessarily feel safe in being fully seen right now. And that's a very different aspect of visibility. And honestly, I understand that component very deeply. One thing that I've had to confront in my own leadership journey is how emotionally vulnerable it is to evolve publicly, especially as a woman and a Latina woman, somebody who is doing this for the very first time. I coach a lot of first gen Latinas who are the first in their family to build businesses. And I do feel like when your business has existed publicly for many, many years, people expect this level of consistency from you while you are simultaneously becoming a new version of yourself. And there's so much grief in that. There's the grief in outgrowing the identities that once protected you, and the grief of realizing that the version of success you once chased no longer feels aligned. And there's a grief in admitting that some of the ambition, especially ambition around your visibility, was rooted in proving. I've talked about this in many different episodes here on this podcast about the old versions of myself where I felt like my visibility was really rooted in proving my worth and getting people's attention and doing all the things that I need to do. And I never found a deep level of satisfaction because I was always just chasing that validation. So when it came time to make specific business decisions, I was always looking at outside sources and not looking within and understanding how to listen to my gut and understanding how to listen to myself to be able to understand how to make specific decisions, but most importantly, how to trust myself. Part of rebuilding self-trust is to become radically honest about what is no longer true for you. That's the kind of honesty where you have to sit in the uncomfortable silence. And sometimes you listen and you're understanding that maybe this is not the way that you want to build anymore. Or maybe you're recognizing that your nervous system just can't handle all of this exposure that you feel is happening within your business. I feel like that level of honesty is really what changes things because now you're no longer building from that performance level, but more from the congruence of your self-trust. I feel that that's where my own coaching has evolved the most. Yes, we are absolutely working on our visibility and our messaging, our leadership, positioning, authority, business strategy, pricing structure, offers. Like we're doing all of the things inside of my private coaching container. But I do feel like underneath all of that is I'm really helping women rebuild trust in themselves. That is really deep work that I don't even give myself enough credit on. And I feel like one thing that I rarely say publicly, I mean, I've been saying it more and more now lately, but one thing that I really feel is how much I bring human design into this process in my coaching. I've found that understanding how someone is naturally designed to make decisions changes everything from how you lead. And for me personally, understanding my human design as a generator with a 4-6 profile with a sacred authority completely shifted how I relate to my business and how I make decisions and the work that I need to do in order to find that fulfillment and the satisfaction that I desire. I realized how often I was abandoning myself and trying to force certainty through strategy because I struggled so much with self-trust in myself and understanding how to trust in the decisions that I was making. One of the things I coach my clients through is learning how to trust their actual data more than the external noise that is complicating all of the ways that they're going to make decisions. We're talking about not listening to social media trends or listening to what others are saying on the internet, because that's not everyone's business model. You have to understand how to track your own data to be able to make trusted, guided decisions and to be able to trust yourself. You have to understand your revenue patterns, your sales patterns, the level of client acquisition patterns that you're having, your own visibility patterns and your nervous system patterns, but also the patterns around decision making. Sometimes you are making dramatic decisions from emotional panic instead of the actual evidence, which is your data. And other times you're emotionally attached to the identities that you've already outgrown. That's why self trust really requires truth. And truth is uncomfortable many of the times. Rebuilding self trust often requires grieving the versions of yourself that survived through over functioning. You know what's interesting though? The first thing that changes when women start rebuilding self trust usually isn't external success. It's their relationship to uncertainty. That's what I notice first when I'm coaching all of my clients is that their nervous system starts softening and they start making more cleaner decisions. You can tell that they understand how to stop the spiral that happens every 5 minutes and they stop needing immediate validation for every single move. There's a steadiness that starts emerging. And ironically, that's usually when their visibility starts working better as well. Visibility feels completely different when the woman behind the visibility fully trusts herself. People can feel it. Your visibility and your leadership really land differently, and your presence, most importantly, lands differently. Now, your visibility is no longer asking, please validate me. It's saying, this is who I am, this is what I see, and this is how I lead. And that energy is what changes everything. I think some women that are listening to this episode right now are realizing that they've spent years trying to solve emotional fragmentation with more strategy. And I say this with compassion because I've done it too. I've looked for certainty in the consuming, the tweaking, the thinking, the proof, and most importantly, the validation. Meanwhile, the deeper issue was I needed to rebuild trust within myself. I needed to rebuild the trust that I could evolve publicly. And I know many of you share that same sentiment. It is so scary when you are evolving publicly because everyone can see it and you feel like everyone is judging your every move or your every decision. And there's a lot of times where you have to say, fuck it, I am just going to put one foot in front of the other. And if I fall, I know that the right people are going to be right there ready to catch me. And you know what? I'm human. I make mistakes. If I am going to evolve publicly, I have to understand that it is okay to make mistakes. Those mistakes make me better and more wiser. And now I have more wisdom to share with the ones that need to hear it the most. Maybe that's what some of you need to hear today. I know that you are listening right now and you are deeply accomplished externally, but privately, you are exhausted internally. And you've been trying to fix yourself through the productivity, but that's not the issue. It's the disconnection with your self-trust. So before we close this episode, I want to leave you with a question that could help you understand where you need to go when it comes to rebuilding trust within yourself. What would your business look like if you trusted yourself more than you trusted your fear? I want you to really sit with that. What decisions would you finally make? What would you stop tolerating? What would you stop overcomplicating? What versions of yourself would finally emerge? What would your visibility look like if it wasn't rooted in proving? What would your leadership feel like if it wasn't constantly performing? I believe a lot of you are one honest decision away from feeling like yourself again. And honestly, that is the work that I do in private coaching. Real recalibration. The women who enter my world are often carrying extraordinary responsibility privately, and externally they look composed, but internally they are carrying a lot of leadership alone. And you are not meant to go through this alone. That is exactly why I'm here, to be your strategic partner every step of the way. So if you feel called right now to apply for private coaching, I want to extend this invitation to you because that's the work that we do in private coaching. If you're interested in private coaching, you can apply through the link in the show notes below. If this episode really felt deeply personal to you, I want you to pay attention to that. because maybe this is the season where you stop trying to think your way into safety and finally start rebuilding trust within yourself again. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is wanting to rebuild trust within themselves. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe or biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I'll personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.